All right, everybody, we are live again, Dynasty Mirror Search for a Guru. And it's such a pleasure to have the one and only Professor Davis. Now, trying to get Professor Davis on the show today, like trying to pull teeth out of a lion with a steak suit on. But we have him on today, and Professor Davis, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody loves you when you come on. You have such a reservoir and wealth of knowledge that needs to be shared. And I keep telling you, you need a larger platform because conversations like we're about to have today and the information we're going to discuss today, people do not know about and people need to know about. And Professor Davis, again, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, Dinus, thank you very much for having me.
I know you're a busy guy. I know you are. So, we'll jump right into it. Me and you had a conversation last week, I believe, in regards to the daughter's name is Remy Vaughn. Is that correct? Remy?
Yes, she's one of the descendants of the Vaughns family. Yes.
Right. So Remy Vaughn, I guess will be her great grandfather.
I think great grandfather. Yes, she's one of the descendants of the Vaughns family, and the Vaughns families, as you well know, as we spoke before, it's a huge transatlantic family which extends throughout Africa, the United States, Canada, the West Indies, and the UK. It's a huge family.
Okay. Now, can we start off with as far as the Vaughn? Is it James Vaughn? Was it?
Well, what we're going to do is I'm going to give you some background to it.
Yeah. I mean, yes, please.
The patriarch is Scipio Vaughn, and as the story goes, the Vaughn family had some of the information wrong. But anyway, let me just say this also too. Much of my information is actually taken from a book called Atlantic Bonds, Bonds, and it was written by Dr. Lisa Lindsay. She is a professor of African and African American studies at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And she spent 10 years researching the legacy of the Vaughn family in Africa and across the globe. But just to get into the story, the patriarch of the family, it starts with Scipio Vaughn, who was born a slave in Richmond, Virginia in roughly 1780. And his master, Wiley Vaughn. Anyway, at the age of 22 or so, Wiley Vaughn moved from Richmond to Camden, South Carolina. And shortly thereafter, in 1827 or so, Scipio gets his freedom and he marries. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Yeah. He's now, they've moved from Richmond to Camden, South Carolina. And he marries a woman by the name of Maria Teresa Conway, she's from a very, very preeminent African-American family, who's also from Richmond, Virginia. So they marry and they have 9 children. And he becomes quite successful in South Carolina, even though Jim Crow is an issue. And so Scipio, in 1840, he's about to pass away in 1840. And so he actually gathers all of his children around and he tells his children, he has 9 children. He says, listen, we have faced tremendous discrimination here in South Carolina. Go to Africa, leave America, find your freedom, find your opportunity, find a new life. And so his son, James Churchill Vaughn, was 12 at this time when he was passing away. And some 12 years later, James Churchill Vaughn is 24 years old. He hears about the American Colonization Society, that they're going to be making their way to Africa. So he jumps on the ship and he makes his way to Liberia. And he's there for 2 years, along with his brother, Beryl. But James doesn't like Liberia. And so the Baptist missionaries are in Liberia at this time. And so he says, hey, I want to move on. And so the Baptist missionaries are on their way to Nigeria, or what would become Nigeria. Mm. And James Churchill Vaughn makes his way to a small community, missionary community, about 60 miles or so outside of Lagos. And so we can actually start the story from there if you'd like.
Oh yeah, please, please. I'm enjoying this, Professor Davis. Like I enjoy history, and you're always bringing something new. So please
Right.
start the story. This is story time. I'm just here, just absorbing and listening and saying what everybody who's watching.
Right. Right. And so anyway, Churchill Vaughns makes his way to Nigeria in 1853. Now he's there at a very, very unique time. Between 1820 and 1890, you actually have the Yoruba wars that are going on. And as you well know, the Oyo Empire in this part of West Africa is dissolving, and you have factional fighting. And it's in a very, very difficult time. And so, believe it or not, James Churchill Vaughan eventually actually fights in the in the Yoruba War. He actually is fighting on the side of the Igba group, right? And he's actually captured in 1860 by the Ibandan group, but he does escape. Now, it's interesting that if he had not escaped Didas, unfortunately, he would have been probably sold into slavery. Unfortunately, the transatlantic slave trade was still going on in West Africa at that time. And many of the captives were actually sold to Cuba, to the West Indies, and to other parts of Africa. And so it was a very, very difficult time. But he does indeed escape. And he decides to leave this smaller community where he is outside of Lagos, about 60 miles outside of Lagos. He eventually marries a woman who is from Benin, and she's possibly a formerly enslaved woman.
Real quick, Professor Davis, Benin Republic or Benin City?
Benin City.
Okay.
Right. And so eventually have a child, and they move on to Lagos. And Lagos, now keep in mind that this guy is African American. He was born in Camden, South Carolina in 1828. And at the request of his father told his 9 children, leave America. I mean, go and find freedom in Africa. Anyway, to get back to the story of James Churchill Vaughan, as I say, after he escapes and he marries and he moves on to Lagos, where he's a carpenter actually by training. Mm-hmm. And basically he decides to build and to buy property in Nigeria at this time. And this is when the British are, of course, encroaching and and they're beginning to take over much of what would become Nigeria. But from the 1860s up until, my God, 1870, 1880, he becomes an extremely successful entrepreneur in terms of building. He's actually supplying building material to many, 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 many different people. But he becomes extremely successful, one of the most elite people on the African continent, or in West Africa at this time. He's very, very elite. So I'll stop there and ask, did you have any questions at this moment?
No. I'm listening. Let's see here. So he fights in the. Okay, let me ask you this: how did he end up fighting in the Yoruba wars? Like, do you have any background on that?
I do, and again, as I mentioned to you before, the Oyo Empire, which was the Yoruba Empire, it was dissolving, and right. As I stated before, there were factional fighting, and he, being a foreigner, needed to kind of decide, look, who am I going to get to protect me? And so he decided to fight with the I think it's the tribe the ethnic group is called the Igba tribe. He fought for them. As a matter of fact, he was a sharpshooter. He had learned to be a sharpshooter while he was in Liberia. Okay. And so he did this because he wanted to ensure that he had some level of protection. I do want to go back and say this. While he had made his way to Nigeria, working with the Baptist missionary about 60 miles outside of Lagos, because he was in the vicinity of the warring groups there, he had built a couple of businesses early on, but they were destroyed by the warring groups at that time. And so he had to make it.
And this is in Liberia or?
This is in Nigeria. This is actually in Nigeria. And this happened as a result of the ongoing internal conflicts with the Yorubas. And so he had to decide, listen, who am I going to side? Who am I going to decide to fight with? and he decided to fight with the Igbo group, which gave him some level of protection. But once it got out of hand, he decided, I need to leave, and he made his way to Lagos. And once he got to Lagos, he was a carpenter by training, and he used that skill over the years to ensure that he became extremely wealthy. I mean, extremely wealthy. As a matter of fact, he would eventually have 7 children. 3 would survive, and he would send both his sons to school in England at King's College, and they would have the best of education.
Now, why did he leave Liberia?
He didn't like it. He, for whatever reason, he didn't like the structure of how Liberia was set up. And so when he met some white missionaries that were there, he decided, you know what, this is my opportunity to leave Liberia and move on. Now, I will say this, his other brother, Beryl, did stay in Liberia and establish his own family. And so there's another branch of the Vaughns family in Liberia as well. So one brother stayed, the other brother moved on to Nigeria.
All right, go ahead and continue.
And so again, he became extremely successful roughly in the 1870s, 1880s. He did something which was extremely unique. As I stated before, he was working for a while with the Baptist missionary, but the Baptist missionary were very discriminatory toward the Africans.
Of course.
And all of the churches in West Africa at this time basically were controlled by white missionaries. So what James Churchill Vaughan did, he actually caused a revolt against the Baptist leadership. This guy actually established the first independent African church in West Africa called Ebenezer Baptist Church in the city of Lagos. And as a matter of fact, Dinus, you've been to Lagos many, many times. And what I would recommend is if you have an opportunity, you would need to go and to see this historic church because it's been in existence since 1888. Now, what had happened after that, after he had established this independent African church, other Africans followed. And they began to kind of break away, if you will, from the white missionary churches. And as a matter of fact, the white missionaries were talking amongst themselves, oh my God, we know why this is happening because of this African American who's here causing a lot of trouble. Because keep in mind, Dinus, there were already independent Black churches in the United States. I mean, we had independent churches in America in the 1700s, and to be sure, the oldest independent Black church in North America is the First Baptist Church of Petersburg, which was established in 1756 by free African Americans and some enslaved African Americans at this time. But this is actually remarkable that you have this person who's coming as an immigrant from the outside,
right,
who is a carpenter and who becomes this extremely wealthy elite. And Dinus, keep in mind, he's doing this in a matter of 30 years. Here it is, he makes his way to Nigeria in 1853, and by the 1870s, 1880s, he's among the Nigerian elites. Now, what I do want to go to say is this now. Now, he would eventually pass away in 1893, and his son, James Churchill Jr., which is equally phenomenal, his son James Churchill Jr. Was responsible for forming what is called the Nigerian Youth Movement, and the Nigerian Youth Movement was the first genuine nationalist organization in Nigeria. And this particular organization, man, actually influenced people like Nnamdi Azikiwe, right? Because this organization was formed actually in 1933, 1934, and you had many Nigerian nationalists who would actually be influenced by this institution. And so James Churchill Sr. and James Churchill Jr. have had actually a lasting impact on the legacy of Nigeria. And just to add, man, you and I briefly spoke about Lady Ademola. And Lady Ademola is one of his descendants. And what's so unique about her, she becomes the first Black woman, period, to graduate from Oxford University. Now, keep in mind now, as I stated before, he is James Churchill. James Churchill Sr. is African American. He's the first, if you will. He's the first he's the first black to actually African American to actually migrate there. His son, James Churchill Jr., is of course the first generation Nigerian, if you will. But what I'm saying is, within a 30 to 40 year period, these immigrants, if you will, to Nigeria really in some ways help shape the future of this country through their contributions.
Professor Davis, why isn't information like this commonly known? Like,
okay,
I mean, you're the greatest at bringing this out.
Well, I'm going to say this, and this is going to sound awful. It is known among the elites and folks who are at Ivy League institutions, black, white, and others. They are privy to this information. Now, I will tell you this. As you well know, I have a PhD. And so when you have acquired this level of education, you have an opportunity to go to these elite archives and do the research. And it takes a lot of research to kind of dig out this information. It's there, but it's just not in plain sight. And just to answer your question again, I think that the information is available to some, but it's generally among Ivy League schools, great state schools, and so on and so forth.
Somebody said everybody knows about the Saros of Nigeria. Are you familiar with the Saros or Saros?
Yeah. I'm familiar. But what I'm saying is, and one of the reasons why I want to share this with you with the Vaughns is that here's what's interesting about this group of people. When James Churchill Vaughn came, and I negated this aspect of the conversation, one of the things that he wanted to do is to stay in contact with his 7 siblings who did not make the journey to West Africa. And so what he would do is what he did for the remainder of his life is to write back and forth and to ensure that brothers and sisters who remained in America were doing well. Now, I will share this one story with you, which is quite interesting, man. Once he made his fortune in Nigeria, the American side of the family, specifically in Camden University, were facing Jim Crow, white supremacy, and so on and so forth. And they were having a difficult time making ends meet. And so in roughly 1870 or so, some of the white missionaries were returning home. And James Churchill Vaughn asked these missionaries to make a delivery for him. And so once these missionaries did, the package that he provided for his family was, oh my God, he provided a large number of gold coins for his family. And what this was able to do, man, is to help his family, specifically in Camden, South Carolina, to get back on their feet. They were able to buy additional property. Some of them were able to move to Chicago, to Boston, and to other places. And it really helped them regain prominence in the American South. And Dinus, what's interesting enough, in some ways, when he left and went to Nigeria, he became more prosperous because he had a level of autonomy and he didn't have to deal with white supremacy.
Right. Professor Davis, let's speed up to 2019. Do you think, you just mentioned something, not having to deal with white supremacy. Do you think if a lot more Black Americans will focus on Africa versus here in America, that they could possibly be more successful in Africa because they don't have to deal with white supremacy?
I think that we can use Churchill Vaughn as an example of how to kind of build bridges across the Atlantic. One of the things that he did do when he decided to go to Nigeria is he did integrate into the culture. He learned Yoruba. Right. He took on an African wife. He actually became, if you will, in some ways African. I mean, he was, how do I say this? He was actually bicultural in a sense. He was clearly American because he was born in the States, but at the same time, he learned Yoruba. Of course, his children were African, but because they were born there. And so for him, it was the promised land. I think that for African Americans, that is an interesting question that you ask me. And I think for some people, it's the right decision, right?
Mhm.
And they should concentrate on making Africa their home if they feel led to do so. I think for other African Americans, they feel more at home here because they have their immediate family, and and this is what they know, and they don't have any real interest of making that transition. In saying that, I will say this too: the Vaughn family is unique in some ways, but you can also find other examples of Black American families who've done similar things in other parts of Africa. Let me share this with you.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to say, give us an example. Go ahead.
Well, and let me share this with you too. Now, what's interesting about the Vaughns, this branch of the Vaughns family that I'm talking about, he settled in Nigeria. James Churchill Vaughn settled in Nigeria. Now, one of the other descendants, I think I mentioned the name to you, Bill Sutherland, before.
No, you might have. I don't know if you could refresh.
He is another descendant of the Vaughn family. He ended up settling in Ghana, but he
Okay.
ultimately ended up settling in Tanzania.
Okay.
And I do want to say this: Bill Sutherland is actually known as the unofficial ambassador to the African continent. This man spent over 50 years in Africa. As a matter of fact, again, he is also a Vaughn, but his last name is actually Sutherland. Bill Sutherland is unique in this way, and I want to get back to the Vaughn family, but I want to make this point. Sutherland was instrumental in ensuring Martin Luther King came to Ghana in '57 when Ghana was getting its independence. Sutherland was also instrumental in ensuring Malcolm X made his way to Tanzania. Sutherland was also a founding father of the South African resistance movement.
Mm.
I mean, he was based out of he was based out of Tanzania,
Mm-hmm.
and he was also a founding member of the American Committee on Africa, and it goes on and on and on. He spent 50 years plus on the African continent, actually engaging African Americans and Africans. And as I stated before, he is a descendant of the Vaughn family too that went south to Tanzania. Well, he eventually started off in Ghana and was there from 53 until 61, and then moved on to Tanzania. His legacy is as rich as the Vaughn family in Nigeria.
Mm. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I was going to say this to you too, Dinas, as I mentioned to you before. These branches of the same family, as I stated before, have been in contact for over 100 years. And today there are literally thousands of them, literally. And they meet and they meet up every year. And here's what's interesting, Dinas. If you look at the descendants of the Vaughns in Nigeria, who've been there for 160, 170 years, most of these folks are the elites of the elites. I mean, they're film directors. They are oil tycoons. It's actually a who's who. Same thing in the United States. You have folks who are ambassadors, a couple of ambassadors, doctors, lawyers, business owners, so on and so forth. I mean, it's the family is extremely accomplished.
Mm. Again, Professor Davis, we need a platform where information like this is readily available. I think that's the issue. One second, keep going, Professor Davis. I just have to get the door real quick.
Right. And like I say, this is just an excellent example of engagement between Black Americans or the Black diaspora and Africans on the continent. And where basically, man, again, these families, they're what? Just families.
Right.
And that's the beautiful part about it, man, that they've been able to bridge the gap. I think this is an excellent example of how Africans in the West or the Black diaspora can truly engage the African continent. I mean, in a real way, and you can measure the progress in a positive way.
Mm. Mm.
Because go
Somebody's
ahead.
asking, is there a book on it about this?
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, I'm glad you asked that question. Perfect question. I would ask your viewing audience, Dinus, please. The title of the book is called Atlantic Bonds, right? It's by Dr. Lisa Lindsay. We've spoken. Dr. Lindsay and I have actually personally spoken, man. It's a wonderful book. And it was released in 2016. And what she does, she spent 10 years plus studying the history, right? And the contributions of James Churchill Vaughan. And I would recommend, man, that people read this because I mean it is an amazing story. It's a story of where you have an African American family, right, who was quite successful. And keep in mind, Dinus, that James Churchill Vaughan's father, right, was actually free. These folks were
that's Scorpio Vaughn.
yes, exactly, exactly. And let me say this again here. Believe it or not, when Dr. Lisa Vaughn was actually doing the research, she had to kind of correct the family. The family actually thought the myth was Scorpio had saw some of the tribal markings and felt that he had saw tribal markings somehow in a book or what have you, and he felt that he had descended from the Yorubas and all that, and that wasn't the case. He was actually born, of course, in Richmond, Virginia, and the family somehow got it wrong. And what Dr. Lindsay was able to do is to go through all the archives in Nigeria, in Liberia. Also, she went to Richmond, Virginia, to the Baptist Society, and to South Carolina. And when she was in South Carolina, she found one of the descendants, and that descendant had a copy of the Bible stating that Scipio was actually born in Richmond, Virginia, March of 1780. And so we know that he was actually born in the States and not in Nigeria, because some people actually thought that he was born in Nigeria, but he was not.
Mm. Like I said, this information is just important to know. Just overall, every time you're able to bless us, we will always discuss the contribution that Black African Americans have made to Africa. And again, it's just not, I guess, readily available, or people don't know
Right.
where to. Here we go, Professor Davis. For people who want to know more about information like this, how do they get started? Where do they look?
Okay, well, and like I have a forthcoming book in just a few months here, and it will, and it won't discuss everything that we're speaking about here, but it will provide some degree of information related to the topic. But I have a couple of forthcoming books, and I will be able to share all this information. The difficulty, Dinus, is that this information is in so many different places, right?
Right.
And you have to take the time to sit through archives and sift all this information out and piece it together. It's just not in one central location. It's not, and that's the difficulty of it. And I think the scholars, those of us who have the time to write and to research, we can kind of piece this stuff together because unfortunately it's not in one place.
It's just, okay, let me ask you this, Professor Davis.
Sure.
I taught a Black history. I taught at a couple schools in Alabama. I did a presentation for Black History Month.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still being taught pretty much we were slaves. Abraham Lincoln freed us, and MLK allowed us to use the same water faucet as white people.
Yeah.
People like you, Professor Davis, I know you can lobby or do something where Black students learn more about our history. Like, I mean, is there any type of lobby or anything in place?
I'm a charter member of the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture, and I think that what they're doing, they're moving in a direction outside of the traditional King and Malcolm X and these types of things, because I think it's limiting and it doesn't tell, I guess, the whole truth about our history. And so we're beginning to look at new ways that we can share this information. And I think what I'm doing in terms of writing, just to give you an example, I did a seminar not too long ago during Black History Month, and I spoke about 10 people. I spoke about 10 African Americans, if you will. And it's interesting. No one, even the professor who was hosting this class, he didn't know any of the people that I had mentioned. Not one. Now because you and I talk quite often. I mentioned folks.
That's the problem, Professor Davis. No one knows.
Right. I mean, for example, I mentioned George Washington Bush, Mifflin Gibbs, these folks, and people were like, okay. I mean, they absolutely loved the presentation. They were like, wow. Why don't I know this? And that was, they have the same reaction that you do. And unfortunately, again, this information is not readily available in one place. It's scattered. And it takes scholars with the time to kind of piece it together and to present it in a way, man, that that people can enjoy it and understand it. But getting back to James Churchill Vaughn here, this guy is exceptional. He's exceptional for the fact that he decided to leave the United States and venture off to Africa and to create something new. And like I say, within 30 to 40 years, man, he is among the Nigerian elites. And he leaves a legacy in Nigeria, which is still there today. As I mentioned to you before, think about this again, Dinus. This guy revolts against the Baptist church and says, look, you know what? You missionaries are racist against Africans. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to create our own independent church. And he did that, which is pretty amazing, because as I stated beforehand, all of the churches were led by white missionaries, and Africans could go but so far. And his son, James Churchill Jr., man, as I stated before, he establishes the Nigerian youth movement, and he becomes the president of the Nigerian youth movement. And any Nigerian who's listening to your broadcast right now, man, know that this particular organization, this first real national organization, shaped the independent movement for Nigeria as a nation.
Oh, so Scipio Vaughn was born. In fact, shout out to y'all, Ken and Sharon. If you wanted to know where Scipio Vaughn came from, his ancestors before he was enslaved, he came from Yoruba land. He did not.
Oh, he didn't. Okay, I'm glad you brought this up.
Well, real quick, because it says I'm reading Wikipedia. Sometimes.
No. Okay, it's the worst source. I'm sorry.
Right. Okay. Because he said he died in Camden, South Carolina. He died.
That is true. That is definitely true. However, now, and like I said, Dr. Lisa Lindsay and I had a conversation. And this woman, she's a professor of African and African American studies at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She spent over 10 years writing the book and doing research. She got a grant to go to Nigeria, Liberia. She went to Camden, South Carolina, and also she went to the archives in Richmond, Virginia. And she discovered through their archives that he was actually born in Richmond, Virginia. He was not born in Yoruba land. That's the part of it that the Vaughn family got wrong. He was actually African American.
Okay.
And when you read her book, Atlantic Bonds, it will show that. And she gets into how she discovered the information. He was actually born in Richmond, Virginia in 1780. And that's why I wanted to reference her book. Like I said,
I'm sorry about that. I was just Googling and I saw Scipio. Scipio and send me to Wikipedia. Yeah, so I know it's a joke. I'm sorry.
No. And Wikipedia is no offense to you, it's an awful source. It really is, man.
Okay. Sorry. I apologize.
But I can tell you this: if you read it, people will be shocked to know that African American immigrants have left this legacy in Nigeria. And Dinus, I don't want to go too far with it, because I do want to say this, that we're just discussing him. And, let me just reference this as well to make a point. And it's not just just Churchill Vaughn. Another example of someone that I can give you, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with John Payne Jackson.
I'm not, no.
Long story short, he established this newspaper that was called the Lagos Weekly Recorder.
Okay.
And it was the most preeminent newspaper in Lagos. Now, he was born in Nigeria, but he was Liberian, but his father was African American.
Oh, wow.
But he established the most famous early newspaper in Nigeria back, I believe it was in 1890. And so that's just another example of someone who is of African American descent, because he came from a very, very prominent family in Maryland who migrates to Liberia, has children, and then his children migrate on to Liberia.
Mm. Is there anybody else? I mean, I love history like this. Is there any more?
You know what? There are just too many people to name right now. And like I say, I tell folks all the time that there's a significant number of Black Americans who are scattered across the African continent, and their descendants are there as well. For the sake of this conversation, we're just talking about the Vaughn family, and like I say, their descendants in Nigeria today are among the who's who of Nigeria.
Well, it would sort of give it away because the last name is the Vaughn.
Right. And also, let me just say this too. Don, Donis, I would recommend that if you have a chance to once you get back to Lagos Island, please visit the Vaughn house. Their family actually established that institution in 1900, and it's still there. It's absolutely still there. And I'll
be back in May.
And listen, I'm going to pick on you just a little bit. I'm surprised that you weren't aware of this Nigerian slant, if you will, African American history.
I had no clue.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it really is huge. And and to your, I will say this as well too. And some of my Nigerian American friends weren't aware of this at all either. They just didn't know. They were pleasantly surprised of the transatlantic links, and they were happy to discover that the families get along quite well.
Are there any other examples of African Americans who ended up resettling in Nigeria that you know
of? As I mentioned about the Jackson family did, which that guy, but there are others. And what I would like to do is to provide you with a list of folks who have done that. But honestly, man, really, I strongly recommend that when you go back to Nigeria, that and somehow when you visit the Vaughn house, I would definitely reach out and to learn more about this family, because what you're going to discover, man, is that their legacy is deep rooted, especially in Lagos.
Are you familiar with some of the Brazilians that went back to?
Yes. As a matter of fact, Scipio Vaughn, a lot of the people that he dealt with once he went back were the Brazilians. They interacted, and because they were a part of the diasporic community. And also Scipio Vaughn dealt closely with, there were people who were called recaptives during the slave raids. Some of the folks were actually recaptive, sent to Sierra Leone, and they became westernized Africans. Some of those folks who were captives were Yoruba, and many of them would actually go back to Nigeria.
Oh, wow.
So yes, and so Scipio actually he had ongoing relationship with many of the diasporic Africans who were in Nigeria. Now, I will say this just to make a point. For whatever reason, the African Americans actually they were somewhat more successful in terms of their business ventures than the folks from Brazil.
Now, why do you think so?
You know what? That's an interesting question. That's a very, 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 very interesting question, man. And I think perhaps it had something to do with this idea of this Calvinistic attitude of progress.
Okay.
or something that is forward looking. And I think that because those other folks were more or less Catholics, and it's just not in the same vein.
If African Americans were to hear more stories like this, do you think they would become more interested in Africa?
Oh, no question about it. I mean, now and honestly, I will say this. I wish that this information was not known among the elites, and that's just the way and for now it is. And I think that, and let me apologize to you because you were like kind of like pulling teeth to kind of have me come on the show, and I will admit that.
Yeah, man, I gotta. Yeah, bro, Davis, you gotta come on. Listen, Professor Davis, look. You gotta come out at least once a month. Once a month. Can I get once a month? Can I get once a month, please? Once a month.
Oh my God. You're putting me on the spot on your show, on your live show.
Come on, Professor Davis, once a month.
Well, you know what? Let me just say this, and I mean it too. I do think that if I can assist in sharing additional information, which will bring the global Black world together, absolutely. Because this is, again, because what we're discussing is how the Vaughn family did that. I mean, they actually brought the Black diaspora in continental Africa together, really, as a family.
Mm.
That's exactly what they've done. And like I said, it really is an amazing story. I can't wait until your viewing audience get the book, go to a library, or possibly online, and pick up this book again by it's called Atlantic Vaughns by Dr. Lisa Lindsay. It is the most fascinating book, if you're into African history, I think, that you may ever read. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. And like I say, Dr. Lindsay and I had a wonderful conversation. And she said this to me. What got her involved is she was reading about Lady Ademola and her work as a women's rights activist. And when she looked at her biography, she saw that this woman had an African American ancestor. She says, "Wow, this is kind of interesting." And she would read on to discover that Lady Ademola was a descendant of the Vaughns. And she was like, "Oh my God, this is a story. I've got to write about this. I've got to write." And it is. Dinus, I mean, it's like when I read this, to discover that, as I stated before, and I apologize for being a bit repetitive here, that when Churchill Vaughn was able to gain such prominence in 30 to 40 years, it's just phenomenal.
Right.
It was beyond belief. And the fact that he was able to keep both of his families together across the Atlantic was just unbelievable. But again, it shows you that African American immigrants outside of America can be as successful as any other immigrant group coming to America.
Repeat that again. People need to hear that.
Well, I say that African American immigrants outside of America can be as successful as any other immigrant group coming to America. I mean, go ahead.
I got a question for you. Go ahead. Finish your thought. I got a question for you.
And because as I said before, if you look at the Vaughn family today, their descendants in 2019, you're going to find people who are just extremely accomplished in all walks of life. As I said, filmmakers, folks who are oil tycoons, people who built schools, and it just goes on and on and on.
Let me ask you, present day, 2019. Why are we hearing about stories like this present day? I mean, as far as,
okay.
Are there any successful Black Americans in Africa right now that were successful as the Vaughn family?
Okay, and this is going to sound really awful, Don. I think that
keep it playing on you.
No, and I said before, it's people among the elite Black Americans. Yes, they are aware of this, and I hate to. There's a class, and it really is about class. And so, are they there? Absolutely. Yes, they're there.
So are there successful Black Americans were successful as the Vaughn family on the ground right now in Africa? That's my question.
Uh, well, two things: yes and no. And let me just
Okay.
say this to you: the extremely successful African Americans who are engaged in Africa, let's just say, what they'll do is this: because they have a ton of money, they'll invest in stocks in businesses that they know they're going to make money.
Okay.
And so they'll do it from America or from Europe. By the same token, there are folks who decided, you know what, I want to live outside of America. I have more money than I will ever need. I'll pick a spot or pick a country. I'll go to Namibia, Botswana, Nigeria, so on and so forth. So those people are there as well. What happens is the everyday person, people don't know them because, I mean, if you're not a part of the elite class of African Americans, you don't know these people.
Mm.
But they're there in sizable numbers, and that's the truth.
Mm.
Are you shocked?
Yeah, I mean, this is great information. I mean,
And Dennis, I do want to say this to you too. When I told you about the Vaughn family, you were like blown away, like Professor Davis.
I didn't know what ever talked about it.
You were like, Professor Davis, I don't believe this. I mean, and then I sent you a couple of links to kind of share with you that this is real, and it is. And it is. And like I say, the members in America are who's who of the elites and the accomplished folks. And I concur with you. I think that folks like me, who and I'll say it, who actually have this information, need to share it on a bigger scale, because folks need to know it. Because what it will do, man, you'll begin to see that African Americans and Africans have been engaging each other constructively for a very, very long time.
Buju George says, as search for guru, elite families in Lagos include the Vaughns, the Serranos, the Braithwaites.
Yep. Mm-hmm. He's right.
Do you know about these families?
Yep. I do. I do.
Can you tell us a little bit about just a little bit?
Here's what I want to do. For the sake of this conversation, I want to kind of focus on the Vaughns. And here's what I'll do. I promise you this. This is what I'll do. I will definitely come back on and share a bit more information.
You might not come back on for another 3 months. Come on. For the people.
But let me just say,
can you tell us about either the Serranos or the Braithwaites, please? Choose one.
Let me just say this, for example. As I stated to you before, there are a number of African American families or descendants of African Americans who are not just in Nigeria, but they're across the African continent, and they've been doing things in Africa for a very, very long time. What I would prefer to do is to give you much more of a comprehensive history of these folks, to kind of set a tone and a context.
Okay. I guess I'm about to hunt you down.
Yeah, but they do. But again, this information needs to be known by Black Americans, by folks, period. And like I say, at the Ivy League institutions, Dinas, this information is known. At the great state schools, folks are aware of it, but they exist. What I like, man, is that one of the things that I like about the Vaughns family is that they left written records, especially elite folks in Nigeria and in the United States. As I mentioned to you before, there were a couple of the Vaughns families in America who were ambassadors. They were U.S. ambassadors, and so what they did was they left records at the State Department. One of them left records at the University of Michigan, and so you can see what they've done and what their legacy was or is. But let me ask you a question, Dynasty.
Go ahead.
Since you now are aware of this information, what are your thoughts about what the Vaughns have actually done?
It's profound, and we want more. Like, we want to know about the Breathwaites and the Serranos. What are the two? It's profound. Like, I want more. Like, this is
Right.
interesting.
And
I just wish it was, more readily available for everybody to learn.
let me ask this question to you and maybe to your audience. And you've been going to Nigeria for how long?
I mean, I started going first time was in August, and it'll be my fifth or sixth time going when I go in May.
Let me ask this question: do you think that many of the Nigerians that you've met on the ground are aware of this information?
Oh no! In fact, let me text one of my Nigerian friends in Lagos right now and ask her if she knows about the Vaughn family. Hold on one second.
Oh, please.
It's late, but over there. Well, it's not. Hold on, let's see. Do you know about the Vaughn family in Lagos? Let me see what she says. Hopefully she's still up. Hey Lola, do you know about the Vaughn family? In fact, Lola's from Lagos. Oh, here, perfect. Lola just hopped in the chat. Lola, do you know about a prestigious family called the Vaughn family? Lola. She's a Lagos Lagosian, if that's the correct term.
I'm sorry?
She's from Lagos.
Yeah, they were Lagosians, right? Mm-hmm.
Lagosian, yeah. No, not Devontae. Devon, not Devontae. Devon. I mean Vaughn.
You want me? Would you like me to spell it for you?
Vaughn, right?
Right, Vaughn. Mm-hmm.
The Vaughn family.
Because the first immigrant made his way to Nigeria in 1853.
Mm-hmm.
And he got there in 53. And he made his fortunes by the 1870s, 1880s. And he sent his kids to some of the best schools in Europe. As a matter of fact, man, his son James Churchill Jr. became a famous medical doctor in Nigeria.
Oh wow! Longshot says, "I grew up in Lagos. I'm familiar with those families and more. They have family houses on Lagos Island."
I don't mean to laugh, man, but I'm telling you, they're extremely elite. I'm serious. They are very elite descendants of African Americans who left the U.S. South and made their fortune in Nigeria. And again, the interesting thing about Churchill is that he came from a society where, like I said, he left in 1851 when African Americans were still enslaved. He makes his way to Liberia first, didn't like it, moves on to Nigeria in 1853. He's still moving to a society which is largely enslaved. What most people don't realize, Dinas, is that in the 1850s, most of the people in Lagos were actually enslaved. So he's moving from one slave society to another, and he has to maneuver.
Somebody said you will find those elite families in Lagos Island, and they are very close to the Oba of Lagos.
Yep.
Shout out to Cynthia Robertson. I appreciate all you do to enlighten us about us. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you so much. It means a lot.
Yeah, and so I'm glad that your contacts online are kind of verifying what I'm sharing with you, because it's true. As I stated to you before, Dr. Lisa Lindsay spent over 10 years researching the Vaughn families on both sides of the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
And when I can't remember when Churchill Sr. passes away in I believe he passed away in 1893. He's actually buried in this elite cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
in Lagos, and the name actually escapes me right now, but it's in one of the most elite cemeteries in Lagos Island. So yeah, and the fact, as I stated to you before, when I discovered that Churchill Vaughan Jr. created or established the youth movement in Nigeria, that was like, I was blown by that. I'm like, you've got to be joking. This is just incredible. He became the first president of the Nigerian youth movement.
Oh, hey, okay. So listen, my friend just. Listen. So my friend just responded back from Nigeria. She said, "Yes, I do. Some of their descendants have different names now, like
Yep.
Ademola, Kofo Wola. Ademola
Yep.
is a descendant. They own
Mm-hmm.
Mobile Oil. Oh wow." Their ancestor was born in Nigeria as a prince. Then he was captured as a slave and taken to America. Which you debunked.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, he was born in Richmond, Virginia. Yeah. This is what Dr. Lindsay had actually discovered. He was, even the Vaughn family had that wrong, because he was actually wasn't he was actually born in Richmond, Virginia. Scipio Vaughn was born in Richmond, Virginia in March of 1780, and we actually have the church records and the Bible to prove that. So he was actually American born.
Yeah. And then she says he later came back after slavery and built an empire. They are a large family.
Yes, very huge. Devon on both, like I say, in the United States today, Devon, keep in mind, like Scipio and his wife Maria had 9 children
Okay.
initially. And so 7 stayed in America, right? And so today, those descendants are all over America: Seattle, Chicago, Boston. I mean, they're no, Dinus. The descendants are in 22 states in the United States. Okay, they're in 22 states, and there are literally thousands in Nigeria as well. And go ahead.
No,
I'm sorry.
Mansa, close the door.
Right. And
Thank you.
so,
Go ahead.
and like I mentioned to you before, Remy is a filmmaker. She's a renowned filmmaker. She's worked in Hollywood and whatever else, and she's done a lot of stuff. It's like I said, what they've been able to kind of accomplish as a family is just beyond belief. And the beautiful part about it is that they remained one large extended family across the Atlantic Ocean. That's the phenomenal part of it, and it shows you how the Black diaspora can re-engage the African continent.
Mm. Yeah,
as one family.
Yeah, y'all said so. So this is something to talk about. So they've been able to keep their generational wealth for the most part.
Oh, absolutely, on both sides of the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
On both sides of the Atlantic, and I'm glad that your friend in Lagos actually sent you an email about that. I mean,
she just texted me back.
yeah, and it's really phenomenal. And what I would hope that you would do, Don, is the next time that you're there, that you would reach out to your contacts and try to maybe introduce yourself. Like, hey, I heard about your history. Tell me more. And like I say, they're one of quite a few.
Real quick, Professor Davis. So Yvette Carnell, our misery merchant. She says that Ryu Panther says the Bond family debunks Yvette that Black Americans have no money. I mean, is that true or no?
Okay. Here's the thing, Dinus, and as I told you before, man, there are many African American communities let me be a bit personal here. My ex, when I was before I was settled here, she was from Atlanta, and she was 6th generation African American college graduate. So I can tell you that there are parts of my family that have been free before the Civil War, and those segments were able to acquire money, property, and to hold on to it. And so there are quite a few African Americans who are far from poverty, and that's just a fact. That's just I know folks who sons and daughters go to the best HBCUs, to Morehouse, to Howard, Hampton, undergrad, and go on to the Ivies, Harvard, Yale. Mommy and daddy have a summer home in Paris. That's just a fact. And I think that the face sometimes of African Americans is poverty and despair, but that's just not the case for a lot of people that I know. there are lots. There are a lot of African Americans that have capital, and that's just a fact.
All right. Darius Lamb says re-engagement with Liberia and Nigeria are vital. What are your thoughts on that statement?
Sure. I absolutely. I do think that Liberians have got to, the current government of Liberia needs to kind of re-engage, especially the American Liberians. The American Liberians have a lot of capital outside of Liberia. They do. In Europe, in America, etc. And as a matter of fact, during that Civil War, most of the Americans survived because they had capital and they could leave.
Right.
And so, absolutely, I definitely agree. Let me just say this to you, man. I think that the key to the future of Nigeria, 200 million people, is, I would say this, that they need to utilize and educate their human capital, man, especially the young people. And if they could ever create a system where they can properly educate the young people, it's over. Within 1-2 generations, Nigeria could be a global superpower. But,
right, exactly.
But it's just the leadership. And just people are undereducated, underskilled. And there's far too many people who are like that. And that's a problem. And maybe, I don't want to get into the political point because I don't know enough about Nigeria to kind of
hold on, this is comedy.
What should do.
Video Mixers, he's one of these indigenous, we ain't African, we Native American, indigenous from America. He says, look up Mende language.
Oh, God.
We are originally from Indians, but brought to Africa. Mende language. The Mende of Sierra Leone, their language originates from.
We are African. We are descendants of Africans in the Western world. That's what we are, and we are primarily African people. As a matter of fact, Dinus, I'm just going to use, and I'll include the West Indies as well too. But I was going to make the point that African Americans, genetically speaking, and you were being interviewed by a wonderful gentleman here, I guess maybe about a week ago. And he was talking about that African Americans are an amalgam of all these different African ethnic groups, which is true. Our ancestral background really extends as far north as Mauritania through Madagascar, and so we are really a fundamentally new people within the context of America, because we are truly an African people. Which is really a beautiful thing. I mean, because we are a diverse group, but we are a new population, a new ethnic group, if you will, within the American context. But we're definitely of African origin. That's just not a debate. So that gentleman that you were speaking with, or young lady, is just not being realistic. But getting back to that point, Dinus, it's just just to show you. That we have been committed to engagement across Africa, and we've actually engaged the continent in a real way, and it is phenomenal. I mean, it is absolutely phenomenal that the folks who decided, well, look, I'm going back and to re-engage and build something in Africa, and it's just I mean, it really is beyond belief. And but no, and Dinus, I'm so happy that your folks, in Africa, in Nigeria, were able to kind of relate to what you were saying and kind of confirm it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that?
She confirmed it fast. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I didn't know anything about it, and I'm surprised that. Here we go. She said they are mostly called Addy mollusk cokers. Not everybody having that name is from the family, though.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
they
yeah.
own Mobile Oil. Man, okay.
What you said?
They own Mobile. I guess it's a Mobile
Yeah.
Oil.
Yep. There you go. This is true. This is true. Yep. Yep. Some of them have the last name Richards as well too, because people married in. But what I'm saying is the vast majority of them actually are linked to Vaughn. They are genetically linked to Churchill Vaughn, without question.
Mm.
Because I know that he had 7 children, 3 survived, 2 sons and a daughter, but his children had a lot of children. One of his sons was traditional, that who had one wife. The other son was followed African tradition and had multiple wives and quite a few children. So yeah, but that's and Donis, you actually seem to be quite ecstatic to discover this bit of information, as I
Yeah, I mean,
as I
especially
stated
with my,
before.
my recent, you know, situation in Nigeria. Yeah, I mean, I just love to see that there's people. Um,
Right. Listen, and I'm sure that folks would love to talk to you.
me being Nigerian now, and
Mhm.
coming from America, I just, being a Black American and being Nigerian. And what am I now, Professor Davis? I'm Nigerian American, Nigerian Black American.
I would say that listen, what, Dinah, let me just say this. I respect the fact that you see yourself as now um, a reborn. I'll put it to you way. You are a reborn African.
Okay,
How
all right,
about
thank you,
that,
thank you.
man? Yeah, you are a reborn African, man. However, you are still linked to the African American experience.
No, absolutely, 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 absolutely,
And right,
absolutely.
right. And and the African American experience has always engaged Africa, man. In many ways. And I just think that, and I'm glad that, like I say, this particular information it really is a positive way. And I think it is an excellent example that we can use in terms of how you re-engage. For those who want to kind of go back and to become, as you are, as I said, a reborn African, so to speak, from the continent. I think this is the way to do it. And because the Vaughns have been successful, they've been successful, man, and they carved out a space, and they did it in a time, like I say, when he left America in 1851.
Mm-hmm.
Black Americans were still enslaved, of course, in the South. And when he
Right.
got to Nigeria, most of the people eventually he would move to Lagos. Most of those folks were still enslaved. And eventually, of course, British colonialism would creep in and they would marginalize Africans there. And so he imagine having to go to a place where you are a foreigner, right? And you would eventually have to kind of learn how to adapt. And he learned Yoruba and all of that. And he married, like I said, a woman from Benin. And so he completely absorbed the culture at hand and had no plans on going back to America at all. And of course, he's buried in Nigeria.
Hmm.
But at the same time, he stayed in constant contact with his 7 siblings in America, which that's remarkable for me. And as I said before, and the families 160 some years later are still connected, which is incredible.
My friend Lola says, Prince Adewale Dinas, you are now Omo Niger.
One more question: what else did your friend say about the Vaughns, man?
Let me see here. She said, Let me see here. That's all. She said mobile oil and
Yep. What are your
they
thoughts?
are mostly called Ademolas, Cokers. Not everybody having that name is from that family though. So,
But what do you think about the mobile oil thing about that? What are your
well,
thoughts about
not the mobile oil is probably a subsidiary of not okay. It's not okay. So in America, it's Mobile, correct?
Yes.
So I guess in Nigeria is Mobil, which is
They're suppliers, is what I'm saying. They're some of
right.
the family members are suppliers. I do know that.
Mhm.
Let me ask this question, Dinus. Are you surprised how quickly they became a part of the Nigerian elite?
Am I no, not at all. But the question I'm asking,
Yeah.
Professor Davis, is okay. There was a documentary called Africans Without Borders, and it talked about Black Americans
Sure.
who
Sure.
relocated to South Africa, who
Right.
somewhat became a part of the South African elite. Is that fair to say?
Right.
Okay. Then you have Black Americans in Ghana, and I'm not hearing those success stories coming out of Ghana like we see here with the Vaughn family, and like we see with Blacks Without Borders. That's what I think it was called, as
Right.
far as success coming out of South Africa, of African Americans there.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, and not necessarily true.
Okay, okay.
And
Go ahead.
because I'll tell you this, I won't get into it too much because I'll give you a perfect example.
Go ahead.
Are you familiar with the Eastman family of Sierra Leone?
No, I'm not.
The Eastmans were originally from the United States, long
Mhm.
time ago, migrated to Sierra Leone in the 1700s. And they're known in Sierra Leone now and in the UK as the most preeminent medical doctors in West Africa. Now, I will tell you this: there are branches of the Eastmans family today in Ghana, and they became some of the first medical doctors in
Okay,
Ghana.
here we go. Here we go, Chris. I mean, I would say Black Americans who left Ghana in like the last, we'll say 50 years. I mean, left America in like the last 50 years and went to Ghana.
Okay, now as I mentioned to you before, Bill Sutherland, who is
Okay.
a branch of he actually is a part of the Vaughn family. He actually made his way to Ghana in '53. He was there from '53 to 1961. He married a Ghanaian woman. Her name was Afo, I believe it was. They had
Afia,
three or four
Afia,
children.
Afia.
Yeah, they had three or four children, and so his legacy is also there. But he would move on to Tanzania and live in Tanzania for another, oh God, 40 years or so, and actually leave a legacy in Tanzania. So again, you do have families, African American families, who actually have left that legacy there as well too.
Mm.
Yep.
Okay. Well, Professor Davis, how can people reach you? I mean, it's like I
Great.
want to continue, but I don't think you're going to give me the information I want. So,
Well, not today, but we'll
so
do it
we can
another
go ahead and
time.
schedule a day for April. Can we go ahead and lock you in for April sometime? Can we? Hey, can we say the third Sunday of April? The
You know
third
what?
Sunday.
Yes, that's fine. That's
Thank
fine.
you. There we
That's
go.
fine.
Everybody, Professor Davis will be back on the third Sunday of April. Mark it
Let
down
and
on your calendar.
right. Let me say this again too. I would tell all of your listening audience, please, to either go out and purchase the book Atlantic Bonds by Dr. Lisa Lindsay, if you want to have an in-depth understanding of the rich legacy and history of James Churchill Vaughan and how he really helped reshape Nigerian history, because that's exactly what he did. I mean, this one man really helped reshape the history of Nigeria. If folks want to reach me, the best way is by email. You can reach me at Davis, Davis, L as in Larry, N as in Nathaniel, 20750 at yahoo.com. I think, Dinus, that folks who decide to read this book, they're going to find it absolutely fascinating. And I think that African Americans, blacks, Nigerians, not your friends who are aware, but those who don't know this history are going to be shocked to discover that there are Black Americans who migrated to this part of West Africa in the 1850s that left a legacy which actually shapes the nation even today.
Okay, everybody. I'm Omo Niger. Thank you, Lola. I'm Omo Niger. That means I'm a child of Nigeria. Professor, did you disagree with me?
No, you are definitely no. I mean, you listen, Dinus. You are a reborn African.
Mm-hmm.
You are a reborn African of African American heritage. How about that?
That sounds good. Okay, reborn Nigerian. I'm Nigerian specifically.
Okay, reborn Nigerian of African American heritage. Absolutely.
I'm Omo Niger of African American heritage. I mean, I'm a child of Nigeria, African American heritage.
Yeah,
come on, dark shit. I said Omo. Come on, dark shit.
Well, and Dinus, I really hope that your listening audience enjoyed this perhaps new information. I'm not sure if I'm sure for some people that they may have already known it, but I would argue that a large number of your folks, the folks who tune into your show, are surprised by this information, and they're like, but like I said, I think it's a good thing. I mean, it's something where there was positive engagement, and they've done this for God over 100 years. That's the amazing thing to me, that this relationship, this family bond across the Atlantic, which spans right now on 3 continents, has been going on for a long time, a long time. It really is one of the most amazing, captivating stories I've ever read. And like I said, I had to kind of reach out to the author and say, hey, let's have a conversation. And let me just say this, as I say that the lasting impact of this man is this. He, well, a number of things. I'll just say this. The lasting impacts is A, that he establishes the first independent African church in West Africa. His son is the founder of the Nigerian youth movement, which played a role in the independence. And his and Lady Adamola, one of his descendants, becomes the first Black woman to graduate from Oxford University, and she goes on to be very, very preeminent in the women's rights movement in Nigeria or in West Africa.
Mm-hmm. This is just powerful. I just, Professor Davis, always a pleasure to have you on, and we appreciate the.
Thank you, Dinus. Thank you so much for allowing me to have this platform. And again, I just hope that your audience have got something out of the information, and maybe it will change their thinking and show that, hey, we can work together and move forward as either continental Africans or Blacks in the diaspora.
Thank you so much, James. Just, I am Omo Niger with African American lineage. And before the African American lineage, it was Nigerian lineage. That feels good. Mm-hmm. This whole show just felt so good.
Okay, I mean, I think that's fantastic. Okay, fantastic, man. I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, guys. Make sure you email Professor Davis if you have any questions. Guys, make sure you go to Search for Uhuru on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and Facebook. Like, share, subscribe. If you're new to the platform, please subscribe. Professor Davis, like, I don't want to close out because I want to keep you on here because I know I'm going to have to hunt you down next
Well,
month.
listen. Let me just say this, Dinus. And
Omo Yoruba. Omo Yoruba. Okay. Omo Yoruba.
Well, listen, Dinus. I will say this. I do thank you for pushing me to to share this information. I do know, again, I was a bit reluctant to kind of to come on the show. And I think that scholars like to always be prepared to kind of share information just in case you have questions. And that was it. But no, again, I do think that people are going to find this a fascinating read as they get into it. And it's really unbelievable. I mean, when you get into it and when you see what Churchill Vaughn was able to do, man, in terms of being captured in the war and escaping and just in just one generation becoming a part of the Nigerian elite, which was just shocking to me. It's just incredible. There's just so many pieces to this puzzle. I mean, it's as if the stars aligned, and he just reshaped. I think in some ways, as I said before, at some level, Nigerian history, and at the same time, the family that stayed in America, in many ways, shaped U.S. history. So yeah.
Professor Davis, once again, thank you for coming on, guys. Thank you. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this. The third Sunday in April, Professor Davis will be back on. So, trust me. Love you too, Amadou. Thank you, everyone. Until next time, family. Peace.
The best of you.